the bigger riads, it's several riads thrown into one. And riad would typically have rooms around a central courtyard and maybe a garden.
Thank you. Marvellous. Big round of applause for Mike now. And his generosity allowing us to do this here, live and direct, as part of the Marrakesh International Storytelling Festival. So I am now going to pass over to someone from the correct side of the Irish Sea for our Irish-American evening, both on Zoom and live and direct. Over to you, young lady.
Thank you so much, John. So that was John Rowe, the artistic director for the Marrakesh International Storytelling Festival 2022. Do we get a hooray for that? So over the past number of days, you have seen that this is the Riad of Secrets. Every day you come out and there's a different room, there's a different little corner, there's a different secret. I didn't even know those doors opened until very recently. You can also hear the birds singing. They sing to us in the evening and they sing to us also in the morning to wake us up. Now we're going to go by magic carpet, because this is the land of the magic carpet. We're going to go by and we're going to say hello to Liz Weir, MBE. Very sad that she's not here.
Hello, Maria. I'm doing very well. Thank you, Maria. Good to see you. Well, I can only see you. I can't see the assembled multitude, but I can hear them.
Oh,
can you hear me?
Are behind and they're spilling over now into the room because we simply haven't enough room for everybody to hear you, Liz. So I'm going to ask for a little bit of magic silence. So the Banatee, the Irish Banatee, which is lead for this evening, is the host of the event. And long ago, the cottages in Ireland were very cold. And if you came and you put your back to the gorgeous fire, then you got a job. And my job right now is to ask silence for one of the master storytellers of Ireland. She's been telling stories for many years and we love her dearly. So if I could have your best attention, please, for Liz Weir. Take it away.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, thank you. Are you going to mute Maria in case there's just a bit of overlap feed? Might be a good idea. Anyway, I'll just persevere here. So I want to tell you one of my favorite stories. It was given to me by a dear old friend long gone. His name was Harry Scott. And it comes from one of the counties in Ireland called County Tyrone. And there's a place there called Altagna. Now, you probably won't find it on a map. You need to go and ask people. It's what we call a townland, a small area. And the people from there had great knowledge. They only had to think something and they had it. So my story concerns a young man who'd been away working as a farm labourer for 6 months. In those days, you had to hire yourself out for 6 whole months. And if you left before your time, you didn't get a penny. But he was going home with his money in his pocket. But as he was traveling, it was getting dark and the rain came down. And I don't know in Morocco if you know about Irish rain. I mean, there's people here from Fermanagh. Nuala knows all about Irish rain. The Irish rain doesn't have to be heavy, but it chills you to the bone. And this young man was getting soaked and he thought, if I could get a bed for the night, I would work all day tomorrow. And he saw a light up a long lane and he started walking up that lane, but he met another young man coming down. And he said, don't go near that house. And our boy said, why? There's a wicked, bad-tempered woman in that house. Don't go near the house, she'll chase you. And he thought, well, it's a bit late at night to be facing any wicked, bad-tempered women, but maybe if I get a roof over my head. And he saw a shed, a barn, full of straw and hay, and he thought, this'll do. And he climbed up into it, up to the first floor, and from there, he could see down into the kitchen of the farmhouse. And there was indeed a young woman, and very attractive she was. And there was a young man with her. And as Harry put it to me very delicately, she was being very good to him. I imagine they're embracing. And the young man was watching all this and he saw on the table a big plate filled with what looked like meat. He was starving with hunger. We would say his stomach thought his throat was cut. And there beside it was a bottle of something that looked a bit like whiskey. And there was a plate with a cake that looked like an apple tart. And this young man was drooling, or we would say the slavers were tripping him. But as he was watching all this, he heard the noise of cartwheels on gravel. And he saw that the pair in the house heard it as well. And he saw the young woman throw her hands up to her head. She grabbed the young man she was with and she put him into a big chest beside the fire and closed the lid down. Then she took the meat and put it up in the top of a cupboard, a press. She took the bottle of what looked like whiskey and put it behind the curtain. And she took the apple cake and put it behind the sofa. Now, the young man from Altagna up in the barn, he worked things out in his head, even if he hadn't heard what the young woman said when she opened the door to none other than her own husband. "Oh, John," she said, "you're home early. I didn't think you'd be home tonight." And here's what she did. She brought him in, and the young fella thought, here's my chance. He saw her preparing a meal, and he went down and he knocked on the door. And the farmer came and he said, "Any chance of a bed for the night? I'll work all day tomorrow." And the farmer was a kind man. He said, "Surely, come in, sit down." And at that point, the young woman was just peeling potatoes out of a pot. Now, you people in Morocco and in New Mexico and all sorts of places, you know that the Irish love potatoes. And in those days, the basic fodder was potatoes and buttermilk, and that's what she was serving up. And if you ever do come to Ireland, Donna Washington, remember this, if you come to Ireland, the one thing you have to do is compliment people on the potatoes. What you have to say, these are great potatoes, they're like wee balls of flour. And the young man said, "But you know what would be lovely with them? A bit of meat." "Oh," said the farmer, "there's no meat in this house. I don't know what's going wrong lately, but there's no meat in the house." "Hold on," said the young man, "I might be able to help you. I'm from a place called Altagna, and sometimes if we think a thing, it happens. So let me see." He put his head in his hands and said, "See if this works. Try on top of that cupboard." And sure enough, like magic, a plate of meat appeared. Well, the young wife was looking to see what was going on here, and the two men started eating. When they finished, the young fellow said, "You know, I have an awful sweet tooth. I don't want to be rude, but would there be anything home baked in the house?" "Oh," said the farmer, "I'm sorry, my wife there," "Oh, she's gone to bed. My wife used to be a great baker, but lately she hasn't been baking anything." "Hold on," said the boy, "let's see if this works. Try behind that sofa there. See what you find behind that." And sure enough, a lovely apple tart. And they started eating them. Then the young fellow said, "This buttermilk is really good. Would you have anything stronger?" "Oh, no," said the farmer. "Hold on. Try behind that curtain." And what do they bring out? But a 10-glass bottle of Bushmills whiskey. Now, there's one thing that happens when you get two strangers, especially two strange men, meeting over a bottle of whiskey. They either fight or it's all palsy-walsy. You tell me your troubles, I'll tell you mine. And the farmer had plenty of troubles. He talked all about his wife and how she wasn't being as kind and as loving. Maybe this young man could help. He said, "I might be able to." "Hold on." He said, "I have it. I know what's wrong. The devil is in your house." "What?" said the farmer. "The devil is in your house. If you do exactly as I tell you, we'll get it sorted." And he lifted up the poker and the tongs that were sitting beside the open fire, and he pushed them in until they were white hot. Now he gave the poker to the farmer. He said, "Do as I do." He whipped the cover off the trunk, he in with the tongs, the farmer in with the poker, and the poor young man hiding in there came out squealing, yelling through the house like the devil himself. "That'll solve your problem," said the young man. "Huh?" The farmer said, "You'll not stay outside, you'll stay out up in the good room." And the young man found himself in this lovely brass bed, big bolster pillow, lovely, beautiful quilt over him, great night's sleep. And when he woke up the next morning, he smelt that smell that the late John Campbell said was one of the best smells ever. It's what you call an Ulster fry being cooked without you cooking it. And he came down the stairs and the young wife set this breakfast in front of him. Now, here's what you get in an Ulster fry. Sausages, bacon, potato bread, soda bread, tomatoes, of course, fried egg. It's a heart attack special, a whole cholesterol plateful. So the boy started into it and the wife was being all deferential and giving him cups of tea and everything. And as he came to go, the farmer stood up and he said, I don't know how I'm going to thank you for solving my problem." "No trouble at all," said the boy. "It's fine breakfast, nice night's sleep. You might as well be in a rehab there in Marrakesh to get such a good time." But anyway, He put his hand in his pocket. Thank you. He put his hand in his pocket and he pulled out a £5 note. Now that's more than the young guy got for 6 months hire. Thank you so much, he said. He was laughing all the way down the lane. When he got to the foot of the lane, there was a rustling in the bushes. And up from the bushes like a bird stood the young wife, put her hand into her apron pocket, gave him another £5 note and said, "Thanks for not telling my husband about me." And that's my story. Thank you very much for listening.
Excellent, Liz. Really, really enjoyed that. I'm going to give you a little tradition from Ireland in between. And one of the traditions that we have is that we have to make sure that when the fire is lit, you're putting as much spirit into the room as you are taking out of it. Otherwise, you get shoved away from the fire and somebody else gets to take your chance. So, Elaine Tinton, Tinton Fane, they say there's no fireplace like your own fireplace. I say that's a big lie because the Riyadh Blue is fireplace is absolutely beautiful and throwing an awful lot of gorgeous light into the room. Now, because of the magic of technology, we're going to come back here to Marrakesh and we're going to say hello to a wonderful man all the way over from the States. His name is Baba C. But I guarantee you that by the end you're going to know his name. Is that right, Baba C?
That's right. I'm the Baba C.
Very good. Come and take your place. Lovely.
So I am Baba C. I am a griot and master storyteller, and I hail from the mystical land of Washington, D.C., in the mystical land of America, United States of America. And I want to share a story with you. And I had a bit of a quandary. You see, I have two stories in my head battling for dominance. The story I want to tell, I've told several times this year, several times this week, several times today. However, when a story is told well, it is worthy of being told again. After all, did we not eat yesterday? And are we going to eat today and tomorrow? So with that, my story begins. You see, in a village, a Kijiji, long time ago, so long ago, if you take everybody, not everybody, you take everybody's age here and add it together, it was longer than that. If you double that, it was longer than that. If you treble that, well, you get the picture. There was a Kijiji, that means village. There was a Kijiji, that means village. Oh, you are listening with your ears. That's very good. I have a friend that listens with his mouth. He's not very bright. So in this Kijiji, the men would go hunting every day, and the women tended to the fields with the gourds and the rice and whatever else that made your belly feel good in the evening. And they looked after the children. The men also took care of the houses, and all that kind of stuff. But there was one hunter who was known to be the hunter of hunters, and his name was, that wasn't his name. His name was Ulugusi. And Ulugusi was a fierce hunter. In fact, when Ulugusi went hunting and the animals knew it was Ulugusi, they just dropped dead. Because they knew there was no use in running, no use in flying, no use in going under the water. If Ulugusi was hunting you, to borrow an American expression, your goose was cooked. Well, Ulugusi had sons, and his youngest son was a little boy named Puli. Well, one day Ulugusi went hunting, but he did not return. The next day, he did not return. 7 days later, or it could have been a week, you'll get that later, he had not returned. 30 days had gone, and Ulugusi had not returned. And people went about their business in the village as if he had never existed. But one day, Puli stood, and he looked at his mother, and he looked at his brothers, and he said, "Where is my father?" And everybody went, "What? What did he say? Where is my father?" And then someone said, "That is right. Father did not come back from hunting." Oh, that is right. He's been gone for over a moon, over 30 where is my father? And with that, Pooley's brothers decided they had to go find their father. And so one son was a tracker among trackers, not like the little things they put, the chips they put in you today, but that's another story. And he said, I will find father. And he started tracking fathers, and he started tracking the trail, and he followed little bit pieces of grass and little shaved pieces of bark. But the trail ended. Another son said, that is all right, brother, that is all right. I have the nose of nose. I know father's musk. I know his scent. And he began to sniff them out, sniff them out. But the trail ran cold. Another son said, I can see beyond what I can see. I don't know what that means. But he began to look. And then he said, oh, no, I see father's bones. And I know it is father because I can see his spear and the other things he uses to hunt. And although they were sad, they all gathered to clearing and they looked at the scattered bones. One son began to rearrange all the bones, and he found the smallest of chips and put all the bones together, and soon there was a complete skeleton. But it was just, as Americans say, a bag of bones. Another son said, I can put sinew and muscle on the bones, and this he did, but it was still just a skeleton with muscles. Another son said, I will put the blood in the muscles, and he did. Another son said, I can make father's skin grow back, and he did, but it was just a body. Another son said, I will breathe the gift of life into father, and I want everyone to do this. Oh, that was a bad idea. That was a bad idea. And Okaloosa went, and he sat up. He said, why am I? Why are you standing around looking at me like that? What happened? And they explained that he had gone hunting 30 days ago and had not returned. But now he was alive and returned to them. And so they went back to their Kijiji. That means village. You get an A. You stay after school. And when they got back, everyone was glad to see Okaloosa say, yay! Yay! Say yay! Yay! Thank you. No, that was my line. So they had the music, they had the food, they partied. No, they partay. See, a party is what you go to, a partay is what you are. Danced and they sang and they ate and they ate and they danced and they sang, they danced and they ate until they could eat no more. And one by one, people fell asleep. A few days later, after the big celebration of Okaloosa's return, found a cowtail and he began to fashion it and gave it a cowtail switch. Now, some people say the cowtail switch is used to keep away the flies. And some people say the cowtail switch is used to discipline naughty children. But wherever Okaloosa went, when he had something to say at a town gathering, he would get up with his cowtail switch. And it soon became a symbol of he who holds the switch is of authority. And he would talk to the folk. And everybody wanted the cowtail switch, but he would not sell it. They offered him cows, they offered him cattle, they offered him sheep, they offered him more wives, but his wife said, no, you get one wife. So the son said, it is okay. When father joins the act,
Muted.
Muted.
Sound's gone. Sound's gone.
Readres, you're muted.
We can't hear.
Take two. And the sons were arguing about who would get the cowtail switch. And they argued and argued and argued until finally Ogalusa said, when I join the ancestors, Pule will get the cowtail switch. Pule? But he didn't do anything. He's just a little boy. He didn't even go with us to find your body. He did nothing. Why should he get it? None of you remembered me until Pules asked, where is my father? It is because of Pule you came to find me. It's because of Pule you put my body back together. It's because of Pule you gave me sinew and muscles and blood and skin and gave me the breath of life. It is Pule who will get the cowtail switch. And on that day, when Omalusku passed away, Pule got the cowtail switch. Now you see, we are here at the Marrakesh International Storytelling Festival. And it's very important to remember what we storytellers do best. I am a griot, so I must teach the stories I tell. And here is a very important lesson. You see, as long as you tell the stories and mention the name of those who have gone before us, they can never truly be said to be dead. For in telling the stories and mentioning the names of those who traveled before us, they will always be alive in our hearts and soul. And if alive in our hearts and soul, our culture and history will grow. And this is the story of the cowtail switch.
August Korshe Kraken Ma Ernest Skelta. And we say he puts a beautiful skin on the story. Can we all try that? Kraken Ma. You're very good at the Irish. It sounds as if you're all from Cork. Try it again. 1, 2, 3, Kraken Ma. Very good. Excellent. Very again to Ireland, to a lovely place. Galway is a beautiful spot, and while I'm chatting here, there's loads of people coming in. We have loads of space. The lads at home don't know this, but we have 4 balconies, and the balconies are full. Say hello from the balconies. Hello. There you go. And down on the ground floor, it's full. And if I had a camera that twisted, I could show you all the people sitting on the ground, listening for your stories. Orla, does that make you feel responsible?
Very, very responsible, very responsible. I'm just looking at the gorgeous fire behind you. And I think as people are coming in as well, as people are coming in.
Well here too. You're looking well, and I'm going to step out of the space and let you head.
Brilliant. Just a little tech thing. If people are coming in, maybe they'd mute their mics because we're getting a few different feeds coming in. And I think if you hit mute all, that's what happened the last time. But look, I love that Bannon Tea is there in front of the fire, and it's rainy in Galway today. It's definitely a day for the fire. And there's a fire theme I already feel coming up among us. And whenever I think of the fireplace and sitting by a lovely fire, I think about my granddad, who used to love sitting by the fire and love telling stories. And he's one of my great story sources, Con McGovern. Con was from Mayo, which is just north of Galway. So I'm going to tell a story tonight from Mayo. And I got this from my grandfather. There was a lovely fine lady, and she had rosy cheeks and black hair and twinkling eyes. And she was fine of heart, and she was in love with the son of the king. And the son of the king was in love with her, and they were bound to be married. Now first he had to head over the mountains and past the lakes to the other side of Mayo for some business. And when he returned, they would be wed. And she waited, and she waited, and she waited, but there was no sign of the son of the king. And there were whispers in the village that he had been mobbed on the way back, and his body had been thrown into the lake on the other side of the mountains. But nobody knew for sure. And she waited, and she waited, and she waited. And as she did, the blush began to go out of her lovely rosy cheeks. And as she waited and waited, the colour began to run from her dark hair and turn pale. And the spark of love was still in her eyes, but whiter and paler and finer she grew, day by day by day, and there was no sign of her love, until finally the last thing to go was that spark of love in her eyes, and when it did, she disappeared into nothing. Now, some people in the village say that she walked into the lake to cross worlds to be with her love. Other people said, no, she was taken by the she was taken by the fairy folk, and they took her in to mind her, but nobody knew for sure. Well, years passed, and a strange thing happened. The people of the village noticed that in the lake this fish had appeared, this very unusual fish. It was the colour of snow. It was pure white, a trout. But there was never a fish like this seen before, and it had almost a glow about it. And people said that this surely was a magical creature, a magical fish. Perhaps it was a fairy itself. And people whispered amongst themselves and said, we mustn't catch this fish. We must leave it alone in the lake. Surely 'twould be bad luck to catch this fish. And the word was passed, and the word was passed, and the word was passed on. And so nobody in that village ever would dream of catching the fish. But then strangers came one day, soldiers from another land. And they had no respect for the ways of the locals. They had no respect for the language, and they had no respect for those mountains. And they set up camp along the banks of the lake, and they were rough in their manner. And they were rough with the ideas and the notions and the stories of the people. But they heard this one story about this magical fish, and they laughed. It was the kind of laugh that would take the skin off your arms. And one soldier had a skinful of whiskey one night, and he said, I'll catch that fish. And he went down to the lake, and sure enough, he pulled out the white trout that night. Up to the fire he took it, and he threw it on the pan. But there was no sizzle when it hit the pan. And you know, if you cook a fish, the texture begins to change, and you can see the fire on the side of the fish. Nothing. So he was getting frustrated, and he turned it over again. Nothing, not even a hiss or a sizzle. And he turned it, and he turned it, and he turned it, and he was becoming so frustrated. And he said, there's one way to see if this strange Irish fish is done. And he picked up a fork, and he stuck it into the side of that fish. And at that moment, there was a sound so plainful, so mournful. The fish leapt off the pan, landed on the ground, and as it touched the grass, it rose up in the form of a white lady. Her hair was white, her clothes were white, except for the side of her, where there was a little trickle of blood in her cloth, where somebody had stabbed her in the side with a fork, and her eyes were black and full of rage. And the soldier began to tremble, and he looked up at her. I'm sorry, he said, because he could see the rage coming from her face. Begged for his life, begged to be let free, begged. And the woman shook her head. You blackguard, she said, you have stabbed a woman in the side. You will pay for this. Oh, please, he said, I didn't know. Let me do anything. I will do anything. Please do not take my life. The spark of love has gone from my eye, she said. So from this day forth, you must leave your life as a soldier. You will not return home to your land. You must keep the fire lit by the edge of this lake, so that when my love comes back to find me, they will see the spark of this flame. Now carry me back to the lake before I change my mind. And with that, the soldier walked over to the woman as if to take her by the hand, but there she was on the ground again as a fish. And he scooped her up, and he lifted her very gently back towards the lake. And he put her in the water, and that drop of blood was growing on her side. And when he placed her into the lake, the whole lake turned blood red. And it stayed that way for a year and a day, and no fish were caught. And at the end of it, though, when the fishermen gradually returned to the edge of the lake, they would see this fish, her, peeping up above the water, often when a fire was lit by the side of the lake, looking up with some flicker of hope in her eyes. And beside the lake, that soldier sat, lighting the fire, keeping that spark and that flame going. And day by day and week by week and month by month, his heart began to change. He turned away from rage and fighting and anger and began to love the mountains and the lake and the language of the people around him. And years passed and his back grew hunched and still he stayed by the fire. And one day, as he poked the embers, he looked over and he saw out on the lake that there was
Wait, Orla, you're muted at the moment.
He knew at that moment he had been released from his spell. He knew at that moment he could go home to his own land and his own language and his own people. But his heart had fallen in love with that part of Mayo and the lake and the beauty. And he tended that fire till the end of his days, the fire that held the spark of hope. Now, if you walk down to Cong, it's a great spot for fishing. And if you walk around the lake, you might be lucky enough to see one white trout. Or if you're blessed, you might see 2 white trout. But if you have a spark of magic in your heart and you look out across the lake, you might even see that fire, the fire of hope. Thank you.
I just want to say that we have some lovely visitors from a local school. Can you tell me the name of the school, Mike?
It's a charity.
Yeah, can you come? Lovely, thank you.
It's a charity called Education for All that builds boarding houses next to the schools. So
Yeah.
it allows girls from the rural Atlas Mountains to go to secondary education, and these girls are now at Marrakesh University.
So they're doing great work here. We've also had some fantastic stories that we've co-created in Henna Cafe, and you will be hearing those over the next weeks and months. And we're really excited to bring them home. But also people here will now tell those stories. So on Snaha Dariga, the red thread. Can we all try it? Snaha Dariga. Look at that, I'm teaching Irish while I'm over here. So the red thread of story is what we say in Ireland weaves us together. And then we see the beautiful tapestries of Marrakesh, just another red thread in the blue-eyed house. So I wanted to tell you how to say blue eyes in Irish. So it's Suala Gurama. Doesn't sound beautiful. Suala Gurama. Pony na Herana. So Ria Diablo, the blue-eyed.
We're not hearing you, Maria.
It seems like nobody's monitoring it. Hello, World Storytelling Cafe. Can somebody else talk and then they won't see me?
I think it's frozen or dropped.
Yeah, I don't think they're online at this point.
No.
I think they're off.
The Riyadh's gone off now.
Yeah, they've gone completely. They'll be back in a minute. I have to monitor it. Anyway, it's good. Nice stories.
The evening's off to a wonderful, wonderful start. What a
Orla, that was
feeling.
just gorgeous.
Very much so. Very
Oh.
much so.
Thank you. Beautiful story.
We could have had a situation because I was going to tell my version of that story, and then we happened to talk. So that was really good that we had that discussion. That was really good.
It's really it was really magical. I was having a quick chat with Liz when I came in after the workshop, and I said, "Oh, I think I might tell the white trout tonight." I was thinking of my granda. I was going to tell the white trout, and I was like, "Oh God!"
I can't claim to have it. I got it from the telling of the wonderful Alice Kane from Toronto. It was one of her signature stories as collected by Samuel Lover. And it was really funny. I was away in California and I was on this Indian reservation. And this teacher said, have you ever heard of Samuel Lover? And I went, yes. And she said, oh, he was my great something or other, And I went, what? What's the chances of that happening? But it was good.
And Liz, I've never heard you tell it, which is
If you not know, it's on my Glen of Stories CD. I'll have to get you the CD. It's one of my. Mine's very like Alice. And Donna Washington was due to go up next, so I suppose we better wait until our Ballantyne's back again. I think it was maybe Donna next, and then Colin. But I haven't heard or seen from Colin. I'll just keep talking here because that's what I do. I'll shut up now, honestly.
I hope they know that they're dropped.
I just want to say that I think they've
I send messages to World Storytelling. Pick it up.
We're still in streaming live to YouTube, Nicole said. I think, Donna, have you host ability? Has anyone else got host ability?
No.
It popped up that Donna had for a second, but unless
really?
Yeah, it popped up for a second. They gave it to Donna. But if anybody just check and see if they're hosts.
It says World Storytelling Cafe's host at the minute on the participants list.
Yeah, I think what's happening is people are coming in and they're muting all as well.
Right. And that's what happened.
That's where we're all going.
I did for like a hot second.
I see.
They're coming back.
Hot second.
Yeah, the Riyadh's back.
And can you tell them they're muted? Oh.
Donna, can you hear me?
We can now hear you.
Yes,
we lost you entirely.
We lost you for a while.
No, we lost you.
You dropped off entirely.
Yeah.
You had too much punching.
We did. We're back now. So
let's mute ourselves then, okay?
Exactly. We sang a song to the She, and then Morocco helped. They did something that I can't put a name on, but it was excellent. What is it? Actually, yes, because you missed it. Will you do it again for our Irish audience? Will you do it again for our Irish audience? So that brought us back online. The fairies were happy with that. Now I'm going to ask for silence. So we're going to I'm going to put my hand around the She say silence. Don't cross the She. Thank you. So now, Donna, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm ready to go.
Do you know how lovely to see you? Do you miss live audiences?
I've had my share in the last couple of weeks.
Oh, good. Donna, because we've had this little break, I'm going to let you tell your story and I'm going to try and get us back on our time tracker. Thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it. And sorry, I forgot to say, Donna is from Durham in
the USA.
North Carolina. Thank you. So Donna.
All right. This is a story that I originally learned from Nancy Schimmel, who's a storyteller out of California. It's a story that maybe, but it's a fractured story, a broken story. And it's about these three princes, and they live in a kingdom where there's a problem. Normally, the prince's job is to go out and slay the dragons, but all the dragons are hibernating. And normally the princes are supposed to go out and rescue the princesses, but all the princesses are 2 years old and the rest of them are already married. Normally there are witches building like scary gingerbread houses. And the idea is that, you know, you have to rescue the children, but all the witches, they were having a party up in the mountains. And normally there are magicians putting spells on people, but all the magicians had gone back to college to learn some new spells. So nothing was happening. And every king still had 3 sons. And you know what's supposed to happen, right? The first son is supposed to go out, ta-dam, and he's a failure. He gets squashed, and he goes home and he's a failure. And then the second son goes out, and he gets squashed. He doesn't get anything. But the third son, he's supposed to get everything. He marries a princess and solves the riddles. He does everything. But if there's nothing happening, all 3 sons don't leave home. And they're all armed. They all have swords. And I don't know if you've ever been with your brothers and sisters and you can't get away from them. They start fighting. Ah! Right? They got swords. Ha, ha, ha. Finally, their father says, oh, you have to leave. Get out. Go find something to do. And they say, Father, you taught us to be handsome, and we are handsome. You taught us to be strong, and we are strong. You taught us to be charming, and we are charming. But there's no call for that. Nobody needs that. We don't know what else to do. The king said, I will solve this problem. I'm going to invite teachers from all over the world to come and teach you things, and then you have to get out. So after 1 year, the oldest son stands up and says, Father, I know what I want to do. And he says, what do you want to do? I want to be a great teacher and a storyteller, because everyone in fairy tale land has to be a storyteller. It's the law. So the father gives him his fastest horse. And he says, go and find your life. And so the young man vaults into the saddle of the fastest horse and he goes down the road. He's going so fast and so hard, he almost runs somebody over. Ah! He stops, and there in the middle of the road is a woman, and she's old, and she's got twisted hands, and she says, excuse me. When I was young, I milked this goat and sold it at the market. But now my back is sore. My hands aren't sore. I can't even milk the goat for myself. Can you help me? And he says, don't you know who I am? I'm a prince. I'm going out into the world to become a great teacher and a storyteller. I don't have time for this. And he went around the woman and down the road. He was riding so fast and so hard, he almost ran someone else down. Ah! There in the road was a young woman with a squirming baby. He said, what are you doing in the middle of the road with a baby? She said, sir, this baby is not mine, but I'm being forced to take care of it. I don't need to beg. I have some money. I just need a ride to the nearest town. Can you help me? Well, you know his problem, right? He said, don't you know who I am? I'm a prince. I'm going out in the world to become a great teacher and a storyteller. Thank you. I don't have time for this. He went around her. He went down the road. He was riding so fast and so hard, he almost knocked someone else down. In the middle of the road, there was an old man with an axe. And the prince said, you're in the middle of the road with an axe. That's dangerous. What are you doing? And the man said, when I was young, I cut wood in these trees and I was a woodsman. But now my back is sore. My hands are sore. I can't even cut wood for myself. I might freeze to death tonight. Can you help me? The prince said, I don't know what's wrong with you people. Don't you know who I am? I am a prince. And I'm going out in the world to become a great teacher and a storyteller. I don't have time for this. And off he went. Well, another year passed, and the second son stood up and said, Father, I know what I want to do. And the king said, what do you want to do? He said, I want to be a great politician and a storyteller. Those two jobs are not mutually exclusive. And the king said, I don't have my fastest horse. Here is my second fastest. And so the young man vaulted into the saddle of the second fastest horse, and he went down the road. He saw the same old woman with the goat, the same young woman with the baby, the same old man with the axe. And when they asked him for help, he told them the same thing. Don't you know who I am? I am a
Prince.
I'm going out into the world to become a great
Politician.
and a
Storyteller.
I don't have time for this. And he went around the last one and down the road. Well, another year passed, and the third son did not go see his father. And another year passed, and the third son did not go see his father. And another year passed, and the third son did not go see his father. And as sometimes happens, if you do not go looking for your parents, they will come looking for you. And his father said, you have been studying longer than your other two brothers put together. What do you want to do? He said, I don't know. He did, I did this like liberal studies course. And I think maybe I just need to go out and find myself. No. And the king said, if you don't know where you're going and you do not know what you want to do, you don't need a fast horse. And he gave him an old broken down horse from the stables. And that young man looked at that horse and thought, I need some lunch. So he went in and he packed himself some lunch and he got on that old broken down horse and he went down the road. He saw that old woman with that goat way before he got up there. He stopped. He said, can I help you? She said, sir, I don't need to beg or anything. I need to milk this goat. My hands are so. He said, you need me to milk a goat for you? That's okay. I'm not going anywhere. He got off his horse. He took her bucket. He put it under the goat. He milked the goat. He turned around. The woman was gone. So he sat down, had his lunch, and drank the milk. He put the bucket on the pommel of his saddle, got back onto the saddle, tied the goat to his horse, went on down the road. He saw that young woman with that squirming baby way before he got up there. He stopped. He said, can I help you? She said, this baby is not mine. I don't need to beg or anything, but I need a ride to the nearest town so I can buy some milk for this baby. He said, we don't have to go anywhere. I got a goat full of milk right here. Hold on a second. He got off his horse. He put the bucket underneath the goat. He milked the goat. He turned around. The woman was gone. The baby was still there. He picked up the baby and fed the baby. He got back on the horse. He went down the road a little confused. He saw that old man way before he got up there. He stopped. He said, can I help you? And the old man said, when I was young, I cut wood in these trees. And the young man thought to himself, I have a goat and a baby. I need a job. He said, okay, I will cut wood for you. And he got off the horse and he put the baby down and he cut down a tree and turned around and the old man was still there. So he followed the old man into the trees, and then he built himself a nice cottage, and he made a cradle for that baby, and a pasture for that horse, and a pen for that goat. He got married. He had a whole bunch of kids, and he became a woodsman in that area. And one day he heard that one of his favorite clients, an old lady who lived all by herself out in the forest, he heard that she wasn't feeling very well, and he thought he better go check on her. And he went out to her home, and he heard all this running and screaming, and that didn't sound right. So he looked inside the window, and you're just never going to guess what he saw. He saw a wolf chasing a little girl in a red cape around a table. I don't know what version of this story you know, but back in the old days, they would save Little Red Riding Hood and they would kill the wolf. But in America, the wolf is an endangered species, so now we have to let him go. Anyway, they sit down, they have cookies and milk, and grandma is hiding in the closet. All right. The first son, he became a great teacher, but he was so proud of how smart he was, he forgot about his students and they forgot about him. The second son, he became a great politician, but he was so pressed with getting elected, he forgot about the people who elected him and they forgot about him. But the last son, he stopped and became part of everyone's life who needed him, and him we remember. He is the woodsman in Little Red Riding Hood. Only you can decide how your story will be remembered and how it will be told. And that is the story of 3 princes riding.
Lovely. Lovely.
I once heard Donna Washington described as a walking Disney movie. Do you get it? Do you get it? Donna, that was excellent. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing with us. And what about the World Storytelling, the Marrakesh International Storytelling Festival? Are you coming next year? Oh, wait a minute. Are you coming next year?
Yes.
That's a yes. Yes.
Yes.
Brilliant. Ahuina Ushla. And with that, I make you all VIPs. So what I'm saying to you is very, very important, people. The red thread of story has made family of all of the storytellers that we see here today. One of the first scenes that you would have seen as we came off the planes and walked the streets of Marrakesh was looking at one another and going, are you real? What? That went on. Part of my clan Skelta has always been the Armstrong Trust. And now representing them, we have Colin Irwin.
I wish you could see the crowd around this place here, and the place that we're in. It's absolutely beautiful. I walked in the door just behind the camera here, the smell that hit me from this fire. I said to myself, where on earth did they get Irish peat in this place? Because that's what it smells like. I don't know what they're burning here, but it smells like peat. But I've just decided a second or two ago on a story that I'm going to tell. And I want to tell it because I got it from the lovely Liz Weir, who we all wish was here with us, don't we?
Yeah. Sure, I'm here.
Scared the wits out of me there, Liz. I thought you were about to walk down the stairs there. Anyway, got this story from Liz. She'll know what it is. Oh, Father dear, I often hear you speak of Erin's Isle, her lofty scenes plains and valleys green, our mountains rude and wild. They say it is a lovely place, wherein man might dwell. Oh, why did you abandon it? The reason to me tell. Many, many years ago, there was a young man who lived in Ireland. His name was Seamus. He'd been married for 5 years to his lovely wife that hadn't been blessed with any children. And they were the poorest of the poor. They lived in a one-roomed cabin with Seamus's father and mother. Earth floor, fire at one end, a ring on the end to tie a goat or a cow if you had one, but they were so poor they had nothing. Seamus's father, his back was broken, working every day from dawn to dusk in their little patch of rocky, peaty ground to grow a few potatoes. And his mother, she was blind. She'd lost her sight many years before. But things are never so bad in this world that they cannot be worse. And one year, a disease came. They called it the potato blight. It rotted the potatoes in the ground. Millions of people starved to death, and many more emigrated to America, Canada, Australia, South Africa. But Seamus was the only member of his tiny little family who thought he could do something about it, could do something about having no food. They were starving, nothing. Imagine having nothing at all to eat. And one night, as they went to bed to lie on their little mattresses on the floor, their bellies empty, Seamus sat by the embers of the fire, the greaseuk, as it died away. And he had one weapon, a little hand axe it was. He took a sharpening stone and he began to sharpen that axe. Shh, shh, shh. All night he sat. He sharpened that axe until it was like a razor. And just as dawn appeared, he took that axe, he stuck it in his belt, and he went out. And he went over the wall of the big estate that he lived near. Of course, in those days, very like nowadays, the poor people were very poor and the rich people were very rich. And the rich people lived in huge houses in these estates. Sometimes they didn't even live there. Sometimes they lived somewhere else. And the penalty for being caught on the wrong side of this wall, trying to poach a hare, a salmon out of the river, a deer in the wood, was death. Transportation to somewhere that meant death. Seamus had no choice. He had to feed his family. He took his axe, he went over that wall, and he began to search that huge tract of ground for something that he could catch, and kill, and bring home to feed his family. All day, he searched that huge estate. And just as it was getting dark, he approached this little grove of round trees. I don't think you get round trees in Morocco. But in Ireland, they're very famous because they're very magical. People use them to keep away evil. They're a magical tree. And as Seamus approached this grove of round trees, he saw something white moving amongst the trees. He didn't know what it was. Was it a ghost or a banshee? He had no idea. He crept forward. He took his axe from his belt. And as he got forward, he could see eventually what it was. It was a pure it's one of the sheep makes a man think differently, makes him act differently. And Seamus took his axe and he was about to bowl that deer over with his axe. And it spoke, Seamus, do not kill me. Do not kill me. Spare my life. I grant you one wish. Seamus now knew he was in the presence of great magic power. He stepped back. He didn't know what to do. His knees were shaking. He lost his nerve. He lowered that axe down to his side. And the animal spoke again. It said, Seamus, spare my life. Go home. Sleep on this. Return here tomorrow, and I give you my word, I will be here. If you decide to take my life, so be it. If not, I will grant you one wish. Seamus went home with his axe in his hand, cursing himself for being so foolish. Why did I not kill that deer? I could have fed my family for a month. He got home. By this time it was dark. His father was still hoeing that little patch of ground, trying to find a rotten piece of potato, a piece of skin, anything that could be turned into a bite before they went to bed, that they might not have an empty belly all night. Seamus stopped with his father. He told him what has happened. And his father said, oh, son, that was one of the she. You were in the presence of the she. You must return tomorrow. Return tomorrow and wish for gold. It will solve all of our problems. Yes, Father. He went forward to the cabin. His mother was sitting on a stool by the door. She didn't know whether it was dark or daylight. He stopped with her. He put his hand on hers, and he told her what had happened. Oh, son, please. That was one of the she. They will grant your wish. They will always be good to their word. You must return tomorrow. Please, son, I beg you, ask them to restore my sight. Gold in the word to me. Yes, mother. He went into the cabin and his wife was sitting beside the fire, waiting for him. Told her what had happened. She said, oh, Seamus, that was one of the she. You must return tomorrow. Please make a wish that we might be granted a child. Yes, wife, he said. Well, they went to bed hungry that night, as they had done for many nights. Seamus sat by that fire. Do you think he slept? No. Not a wink. He sat by that fire with his axe and a sharpening stone. He sharpened that axe until it was like a razor. He put it in his belt, and at dawn the next morning, he went over that wall. He went back to that grove of rowan trees. Do you think the deer was there? Yes. Of course it was. It was one of the she, and they always keep their word. He took the axe from his belt. He went forward. He was going to kill this deer. But it spoke again. Seamus, you've slept on it. What will it be? Will you take my life, or will you have a wish? He stepped back. He looked at the deer right in its eyes. He said, I will have the wish. So be it, the animal said. Speak it and it will be yours. Seamus said, I wish my mother could see my wife rock our baby in a cradle of pure gold. And I wish was granted. Some people say that family went to America, where they bought a ranch of their own and lived happily ever after. And that's the story why that family left Ireland. Thank you.
Now we step on the magic carpet again of the cyber magic carpet, and we fly across the sea to a man that should have been here, and I was looking so forward to meeting him. David Thompson, come in, David Thompson.
Okay. Hey, y'all.
Are you there?
Everybody.
Hello, how are you, my darling?
Oh, short, fat, and sassy.
He's saying hi, everybody.
Okay.
You're a wee bit quiet,
Okay.
David. Can you come near your microphone?
Yes, how's that?
That's perfect.
Okay,
That's
hold
perfect.
on. Let me move my chair up. There we go.
Now, before I let you go, Sue will kill me if I don't say David Thompson is from Texas.
Hi.
Texas.
You're frozen. I don't know if it's time for me to tell you or not.
So, David, if you can tell your story, great. Tell it.
Okay, here we go. Well, Colin and I have a very good friend, Donna Ingham. And Donna has taken the Greek stories and have set them in West Texas. And it's wonderful. So I took it upon myself to say, how about the Norse stories? So I'm looking in, and I've gotten one, and I've been working on it. And guess what, gang? I'm premiering it today. So I hope y'all like it. I hope it comes through. Now, the thing is, what's happening is this is told in some dialect and accent. So be aware of that. You know, we've all heard the Norse stories about how the gods would come and walk on earth and have adventures and things like that. And I've been wondering what would have happened if the gods, the Norse gods, had come to West Texas. I hope you can hear it.
Yes.
1 second, Dave.
Maria.
So anyway.
Yeah, we can hear it.
Yeah, but can you mute?
Can I mute?
No.
Oh, well. All right. Anyway. So
No. Awesome.
I'm going to continue. So anyway, what happened is this. Now, you have to realize, my friends, that when you're in Texas and you start at the very east border of Louisiana and Texas, and you drive straight across to get to the border of Texas and New Mexico, did you know that 10 hours later, you're still in Texas? And that's what this whole story might be about. It turns out between the small Texas towns of Muleshoe and Oatmeal, there's this wonderful little family diner, and they call it the Dewdrop Inn. So what happens, do you think, when you have Ragnarok at the Dewdrop? You have something to talk about. Turns out that the Dewdrop was owned by Miss Vicky and Mr. Ville. And that turns out that everybody liked them. They were the nicest people. Oh, my word. But she was always there for you. And he was always cooking, and she was always a singing. And they were having just a grand time owning this diner, saying hello to the people who come in. Well, there had been a period of time where there had been no customers whatsoever. One night, it was getting close to closing time. They heard something down the road. And looked through the window, and guess what they done saw? They saw this big, beautiful, white 2-ton pickup truck with 8 wheels, not 4, but 8 wheels. And on the front, instead of that hood ornament, there were 2 birds who were made out of metal, and their eyes were just gleaming and moving. And on the side of the truck, it was said, O.D. and Son. And they were wondering to themselves, I wonder who these people are. So people got out of the truck. There was an older man, handsome, but, dignified. He had long white hair that he probably had pulled back into a ponytail, had a low brim hat. And, oh, what's that? He had a patch over one eye. Wonder if he was driving. Well, then out of the other side, got this big old man. He was broad as he was tall. He had fiery red hair and a beard and a big grin. And he was carrying something in a holster by his belt. No, that ain't no gun. That's a hammer. Well, I don't know. We got to go get ready. Come on. So the two men come into the Dewdrop Inn. How y'all doing? Come on in. Where you want to sit? You want to sit at the counter, or do you want to choose a booth? The old man said, we will choose a booth. Thank you very much. So they went and sat down, and Miss Vicky got some water and brought it out to him, got the menus under one arm, puts it down and says, we're so happy y'all are here. Are y'all come around much? She said, no, we're strangers. We're just passing through. We're looking for some things to do. Well, there's not much to do here, but I can tell you right now, I made some lemon meringue pie, and I know that you're going to love to have it. Well, thank you very much, ma'am. Right now, I'm going to have the tuna melt and I think a big old cup of coffee. You want sugar cream with that? No, honey, just black coffee. Oh, and she looked over at the big old guy with the red hair, and she said, honey, what you want? And he looked at the menu. He said, yes. She went, what? He said, yes. The older man says he's very hungry, so give him one of every burger and every sandwich you got. And you got beer? Well, what you want to call beer? Well, bring it anyway. He wants some beer too. So all of that was going on, and Miss Vicky was talking with the people, just getting to know who they were and where they was going and where they come from. And then the news came over the radio. This is the state police telling you that there is an outlaw biker gang. They're on I-10 and they're coming towards Oatmeal, and you better watch out for these are the giants. Everybody froze. The giants. We all know about the giants. They were just as cold could be. They'd bleach their hair out white. They'd bleach their eyebrows out white. They bleached their beards out white. And they each one drove matching ice blue motorcycles. And they were out front of the Dewdrop Inn. Oh, Miss Vicky was, oh my God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Mr. O.D. said, don't worry. We got your back. So these motorcycle guys come storming in. Hey, woman, bring us something to eat now. We want it now. And do not, whatever you do, spit in our food like most people do. Yes, I'll make certain. And Mr. O.D. stood up. And he turned to what was probably the leader of the gang. And he said, excuse me, men. Don't you know how to talk to a lady? I don't see no lady around here. Who are you anyway? Oh, hi, I'm Mr. O.D. Wednesday. They call me O.D. That's my son, Tori. He's Odin's son, you know. So here's my hand. Let's have a shake. And when they touched hands, You could hear the leader of the gang's bones in his hand crack and break. And he went, I get you, old man. And Tori got up and said, you ain't doing nothing to my daddy. You ain't gonna do nothing. And the man on the broken hands says, come on, boys, let's get him. And so Miss Vicky and Mr. Bill, they went back into the kitchen. They hid under the table. And Lord, tell me, there were plates flying everywhere. And there were forks and knives being stuck in the ceiling. The grill went up in flames and the hood came down. The water mains broke. The whole place was just a rocket. People being thrown through the window panes. Whoop, 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 whoop. Oh, and Miss Vicky was holding her head and says, oh my God, what are we gonna do? I hope our insurance is paid up. Oh. And her husband said, that's okay, honey. We'll just get through this first. Let's just get through this first. Breathe with me, breathe. And it was all quiet. And those motorcycles left. Well, Miss Vicky and her husband come out from behind the kitchen where they was hiding. Oh, honey, it was a hell of a mess what they saw. There were booths upripped. There were panes of glass broken. There was all the crockery. The coffee urn was bent where it had been hit over someone's head. The counter was, oh, I'm not even going to talk about the counter. And Miss Vicky started crying. Mr. Odie turned around and says, honey, breathe. Just breathe. I got something for you. He reaches in his pocket and he pulls out 4. Count them, people. 4 big old nuggets of gold and gives them to them, all 4 of them, and says, I think this will cover the damage. Well, they just looking at that gold nugget and looking at Mr. Odinson and Tori, his son, and watch him as they went out the door. When they got into that white 2-ton truck with the 8 wheels and the 2 birds on the front. Oh, I tell you, he even had the word sleepy painted on the front. And they got in. So, my friends, that's what happens when the North gods come to West Texas. Thank you.
Okay, can we give David a huge round of applause? Thank you so much, David. And I will talk to you soon. Mwah. So, the next person that's coming in is half Irish, half American. So you can Ishka Baha, which is the whiskey, and you can have the Ishka, and you can mix them, and then you have Nicole Blue. Nicole Blue, right? Are you there,
Hello.
Nicole?
I'm here. Thank
Hello,
you so
Nicole.
much. Hello.
Lovely to. Hello. Are you going to sing us a song?
I am. I'm going to sing a song. Tell you a little bit about this song. So I came to Ireland from America, from the States, all the way from Washington, actually, Washington State. And when I came to Ireland, I started listening to trad and learning some trad traditional Irish music. And although I love the old traditional music, I also love the newer traditional music. It's still ballads and music that maybe was written more recently. And this particular song really speaks to me. And Maria, this actually is for you tonight. This song.
Yes.
Yes, I really love this song. Is written by Jimmy McCarthy. And it's a song about Cork, but it's also a song that I really love because it really showcases that special thing about the Irish nature and about Irish music especially, which is that combination, that lovely combination of both light and dark in the same thing. And there is that in this song. It is called The Mad Lady and Me. So I'll sing it for you now.
Thank you so much. I'll stay here.
Among the walls and ruins of horrid civic stone, I walked without a lover for my older bones. The sun was strong and going down. It was a dreamlike day. It's there I met the Trinity. It's there I heard them say, and she said, bye, bye, mama. Goodbye, brother John. Fare thee well, ye Shandon bells. Ring on, ring on. She leaned and leaned much closer. She kissed them all goodbye. Her mother said, don't go, my love, we all must by and by. A drunken tongue said, leave her off, she'll drive us all crazy. She turned around and saw my face, and both of us were she. And she said, bye, bye, mama. Goodbye, brother John. Fare thee well, ye Shandon bells. Ring on, ring on. Up onto the limestone wall and down the level steps, she threw herself into the stream with a splash and no regrets. Side stroke swimming midstream, blowing kisses to the crowd, and everything was silent. The sky held not one cloud, and she said, bye, bye, mama. Goodbye, brother John. Fare thee well, ye Shandon bells. Ring on, ring on. We were swimming off to the sunset. We were swimming out to sea, singing down by the opera house, the Mad Lady and me.
Oh my goodness. You know now you're never safe after I know you can sing that. I'll be asking you to sing it morning, noon and night. Thank you so much, Nicole. Big kisses from Marrakesh. And now we're coming back into this room and we're going to go over to the corner and we're going to draw out a druid. His name is Eamon Keenan, and he made absolutely magical things happen. I can't wait to see what he.
I'm not going to tell one of the magical ancient stories of Ireland. I'm going to tell you a more recent story of Ireland, and it's true. Not too far away from where I live in Belfast in Northern Ireland, there's a town called Lurgan. And if you go to Lurgan graveyard, the name of the graveyard is Shankill. And if you don't believe this, you can go onto the internet. Not now, because the internet should be off now. You can go onto the internet and find Shankill graveyard. Graveyard, there is a grave, and at the bottom of the gravestone there it says, Marjorie McCall lived once, buried twice. And this is the way of it. About 200 years ago, in the town of Lurgan, there was a young man, John McCall. John McCall was a very prosperous young man. He was a good living and a very decent sort of a man. And he was at that age where he knew that he wanted a wife. And it just so happened that in the church where he went to every Sunday, there was a beautiful young woman. Her name was Marjorie. Well, the two of them got talking. And after they got talking, it was very soon before they were out walking together. And the more they walked out together, the more they knew they were so suited for each other. They agreed on things. They could argue about things. And they laughed. And there was a kindness in both their hearts towards each other. Well, after a few months, John got down on his knee and he said, Marjorie, I love you. Will you marry me? And she said, of course. I've loved you from the moment I set eyes on you in the church. And so they went to the big town to get a ring for their wedding. And sure enough, because John had been doing very well in business, he was able to purchase the most beautiful golden ring, so well made, so well wrought, that, well, when she came back home and went around the town with her friends, she would just happen to go. Oh, she was so happy. And within a few months, the banns were read. And then they got married. And just like now, the two of them set up house together. They had a small house. They didn't have didn't have a lot of things, but they were doing okay. And again, just as happens now, the children came along. They had two children, a boy and a girl, and they were so happy together. She looked to look after John, and John worked hard to make sure that he looked after his family. And everything was well. Well, everything except for one thing. And that one thing was this. Every so often, maybe just once a year, she would fall very ill. She felt so weak that she could hardly lift her hand. But John looked after her and she recovered and life went on as normal. Until that day happened when everything changed. John came home from work, came into the house, and the house was quiet. He went into the kitchen and there was Marjorie lying on the floor, cold and still. He went over to her and he shook her and she didn't respond. The children came in and didn't know what was happening. And they were shocked and surprised. What are we going to do? And John said, send for the doctor. Get the doctor down here now. And the doctor came, and you have to remember, this was over 200 years ago. The doctor tried to find a pulse, and there was no pulse. He tried to find a heartbeat, but there was no heartbeat. He took out a little a little mirror and put it against her mouth to see if she was breathing. There would be condensation on the mirror, but there was no condensation. And the doctor said, "John, it grieves me to say, but your beautiful young wife is dead." In the best room. The mirror was turned to the wall. The curtains were closed and there was a black bow on the door of the house to acknowledge that there had been a death. And Marjorie lay there in a white sheet in the coffin, and people came in and they expressed their sorrow. They sang songs of sorrow and they prayed. And then they talked and they sat around while Marjorie lay in her coffin. But after the right time, when the wake was to end, the coffin lid was lifted to be put on top of the coffin, to be screwed down tight. And just as they lifted up the coffin lid to put on top of Marjorie's body, somebody at the back of the room, somebody who was a stranger, somebody who nobody knew, a stranger said, "John, are you going to leave that beautiful ring on Marjorie's finger?" John turned round. He was furious. "How dare you say anything like that? I bought that ring for my wife. I loved her and it will stay on her finger." The man disappeared. The coffin lid was tightened and they brought it down to the graveyard. And just like we do now, the coffin was put into the grave. The prayers were said. The clods were put on top of the grave. Up until the grave was filled. And then people went home. John took his children into the house so that they could grieve together. And night came. And with the night, a man with evil intention came into the graveyard and he had a big, sharp shovel. And he went to the grave of Marjorie McCall, and he began to dig, and he began to dig deeper and deeper and deeper until he came to the coffin. And when he came to the coffin, he pushed away all the muck and clabber. And then he got that sharp spade and stuck it underneath the coffin lid. Crack! It smashed open. There was Marjorie lying in her own coffin, her hands upon her body. The man took out a sharp knife and then went to the finger of Marjorie McCall. Because he couldn't pull the ring off her finger. So he cut through the very flesh of Marjorie McCall's finger to steal that ring. And as soon as he cut through the flesh, Marjorie McCall jumped up into his face. He screamed, jumped out of that grave, ran away dark into the night, and was never seen or heard of again. Marjorie McCall jumped up, staggered out of her own coffin, her own grave, and then she walked home in her white ship, covered in muck, blood dripping from her finger. She went to the door of her own house, knocked on that door, and her husband said to the children, "If we didn't know better, who would you say that was?" And the children said, "That would be Mammy's knock. She always knocks like that." And so they went to the door, opened the door, and there was Marjorie McCall standing there, covered in muck, blood dripping. Her husband fainted, The children ran to her and hugged her and squeezed her and were so overjoyed, crying with tears of joy to have their mother back. They sent for the big doctor to come down. And the big doctor was able to tell them that Marjorie had suffered from an illness, narcolepsy, where your heartbeat almost stops, your breathing almost stops, your pulse almost stops. But this was 200 years ago, remember. Don't worry about this now. There's what's called modern medicine, and they can identify whether you are really dead or not. But let me tell you something, you're laughing. But let me tell you something, it would not be the first time that somebody had opened a grave where somebody had died exactly with that illness. And there's a certain writer, Edgar Allan Poe, who had the most horrible fear of being buried alive like that. And it would be true to say that sometimes the coffin would be open and inside would be a skeleton lying there with its mouth open in a silent scream and little bits of wood underneath the nail way out of a coffin. It used to be in the old days that in some cases, if you were rich, you could afford to have somebody to stand over your grave, and there would be a string from the hand all the way up through the earth, and there will be a bell on top of the grave. Have you ever heard the phrase dead ringer? Yeah. Okay, guys, hold on. Let me tell you something though. Here's the thing. Marjorie McCall lived a long life, but her husband died very soon after this incident. Marjorie McCall married again and had another child. She is buried in her second husband's grave. And it is there that the plaque that says Marjorie McCall lived once, buried twice is. Look it up on the internet if you don't believe me. But in finishing this story, all I can say is the saddest part of it for me is that nobody knows where John McCall lies. Thank you very much.
Patience, we have 3 more tellers. I'm the next teller. Yay! My name is Maria Gillen. I'm the Kerry Writers storyteller in residence. They're here. Hello, Jimmy Deanahan of Kerry Writers Museum. Jimmy is actually the ex-Minister for Culture of Ireland and is very invested in stories. And we're delighted to be here representing that very long tradition. And we've been talking about tradition all night. The Bards of Ireland would go from house to house, from castle to castle, and they would be fed and watered by the men of those houses and castles for the stories that they told. And it was really important that you would tell a story to honor the place that gave you rest. So this is my story called Riad Yufle Sula Gorama. So can we try Sula Gorama? Sula Gorama. It feels like a spell. And this is the story that wandered into my heart as I listened to the birds sing to me in the morning. Long ago in Ireland, in a place called Fionn Uiga Finug, the place of the fair-haired young person, there was a girl. She lived in a cottage that has become very famous over the years for the beautiful songs and stories that have come out of it. It is known as Tig Shiamsa, and Sean McCarthy wrote beautiful songs there. Red-haired Mary, all of these songs that we sing today. But before it was that gathering house, It was the home of Saoirse. That was the free spirit. Saoirse, meaning free. And did you hear as it just broke free from the fire? And so even the house was listening. And her house listened. It creaked at odd times. It woke her up in the morning and it stayed silent at night. And a little bird came to visit her and Spido, the linnet. And it would come to the little lintel of her cottage, which had a much lower roof than this fine house. And she would spread little bits of crumbs on the lintel so that the bird could feed. And then she said, this is not an Spido. This is not a linnet. It's so exotic. What kind of bird is this? And she tried calling to the bird. And the bird mimicked her and called back. And she said, did I dream its call or will I try another? Will I try another?
Yes.
So she tried. And the bird said, and she said, this is on Éan Dréachta. Let's try it together. Éan Dréachta, the magic bird. Where do birds live? Birds live in the trees. And in Ireland, they say there's two types of fairies. There is the Dina She, those that live in the mounds. She means the mounds, the mounded people. And there is Dina Mara, those fairies that live in the sea. Some of them look like horses. Coppel, Bon Mara, the white horses of the sea that come in the waves as they crash into land. So she was wondering about this bird, and she looked in its tree, and she began to dream of other trees, big, beautiful trees, trees that held their hands to the sky. She didn't know what these trees were called, but when I stepped off the plane and I walked through Marrakesh, I knew these trees to be olive trees, old trees. Trees put their hands to the sky, put their feet in the ground, and they take water and air, and sometimes they make fire. They are of all of the elements. They're really magical. And this bird had come to tell the tree a secret. And this tree grew next to the cottage in Finuica. And it tapped on the window of this girl as she slept. Saoirse tar cuam, Saoirse tar cuam. Will we try it together? Saoirse tar cuam, Saoirse tar cuam. Saoirse, come to me. Saoirse, come to me. I need you to do something. It wouldn't let her rest. And even though it was a long time ago, when
You're frozen.
Come back, we can't hear you.
The fairies got you. That's what you got for talking about the she. Go on all together. They'll figure it, I hope. We can talk now because they'll cut it out of the recording. I hope. Oh dear.
Liz, you're on mute.
Probably just as well, Orga. I say we're streaming live.
This is, you know, years to come. This is the thing that's worth millions. Where we start, it's like the outtakes of the story.
Hey, good point, Orla. You'll have to tell them that to keep the outtakes because somebody can.
It must be the Wi-Fi isn't too good in the Riyadh, I think, because it's been dropping, the freezing and so on.
Oh.
I'll be hosting my own session in half an hour, so I may slip away. I may have to slip away.
Yeah, I have to go off as well, but we'll fingers crossed. Maybe if we clap our hands, I don't know, will anything happen?
It's definitely the she at work, definitely.
Yeah, I wonder if they dropped a little drop on the ground for them before they started. They might have forgot it.
We didn't do that.
Yeah.
Didn't do that.
Yes. Can we do it? Is there anything we can do?
Hold on, I'll put a bit in the aloe vera plant. 1 second.
Can I throw my pretend gold cufflink down or something?
I threw a bit of tea in the aloe plant. I don't know if that's going to do it.
We'll try St. Anthony for things that are lost.
We'll do Madeline.
Right? Yeah, for having me for the week. Thank you so much. And
I can hear Maria coming through in the World Storytime Cafe.
It worked! It worked!
St. Anthony never loses.
also a big kiss to Ireland, to Jimmy Deanahan, to all the Kerry Writers Museum. Thank you also for having me as your storyteller in residence. I love my child. So now I'm calling in again to our beautiful people across the sea, and I'm looking for Liz Mangle from New Mexico. Are you there, Liz?
Hello, can you hear me? Good. It's Liz Mangual, thank you.
Oh, you're coming through now, Liz.
And I'm happy. Yay! I'm sorry that we missed a lot of your story, Maria.
No problem, Liz. I will do it again. Send it out to the internet. No problem. Part of
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Great. Well, I'm. Tell me.
Now we look forward to your story.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Well, I am going to tell a story that comes from across the shores of Morocco, from the island of Puerto Rico. And this is a story that came to me in a children's picture book, and then by George Crespo. Then it led me to the original source of it, which was first published in the 1500s. So I was doubly excited when I came upon the original shard of the story. And it is a story of the Taino people, the original people of the island of Puerto Rico. This is my offering. Había una vez, long, long ago, there were 4 mountains: Cuba, Jamaica, Hispaniola, y Borinquen. On the mountain of Borinquen, there lived a cacique. At the edge of a green and lush forest, there lived a cacique, a chief, whose name was Yaya. Yaya lived with his wife Atabey and their only son, Yayael. Yayael was known for his skillful hunting. Whenever Yayael went hunting, he'd always bring back enough game to feed the entire village. Every day, Yayael will would go deep into the forest with his bow and arrow slung over his shoulders, the bow that his father, Yaya, had carved for him from the wood of the tabonuco tree. The tabonuco, a magical and life-giving tree. And then one day when Yayael was deep in that green, lush forest, he noticed a change come through the woods. The air stood still. And then suddenly, the wind picked up. It began to blow and shriek through the forest. Yayael began to run, and he ran and ran for shelter. But there was no escaping Guabansek, the goddess of hurricanes. And then the people out in the fields, they too knew that Guabansek was near, and they ran for safety until at last they found a cave. Some managed to make it and others did not. And those that did huddled inside that cave, waiting for Guabansek, the hurricane, to spend her fury. Now they huddled together and they prayed. Yukau! Yukau, protect our village! Yukau, protect our people! But Guabansek raged. It raged outside, taking everything in its path. Yaya and Atabe also prayed, Yukau! Yukau, please protect Yayael. Protect him. And finally, when the storm finally cleared and stood still, the people went out only to find devastation. Their huts were flattened, trees uprooted, rivers overflowing over their fields. Now the people went searching for the missing ones. Yaya went searching for Yayael. He walked from village to village only to find more devastation. And he searched and searched, but there was no sign of Yayael. And then he was about to turn around and go back to his village when suddenly he stumbled upon Yayael's bow, the very one he had carved from the tabonuco tree. Hope, he thought. A sign. Yayael! Yayael! But there was no answer. Later that evening, when Atabe saw her husband with only their son's bow in his arms, she knew that they would never see their son again. Yaya and Ata fell to their knees and wept. All through the night they wept. In the morning, when the sun had come up, Yaya said, let's place Yaya's bow in this gourd, Ata. And so they placed his bow in a large gourd and they hung it from the rafters of their hut. Maybe Yaya's spirit will stay with us, Ata. And time went by. And with time, the people's grieving began to pass. And the people slowly willed themselves back to work again. They rebuilt their huts and rebuilt their village. And the women went out and planted the few remaining seeds. They planted corn, beans, ñame, yuca, their sacred cassave. And the men, they too went to work, and they went out hunting. They went hunting again. But without the power of the tabonuco tree and Yayael's skill, they seldom brought back enough food to feed everyone. Food was scarce. And one day Yaya said to Atabe, Ata, I really miss our son, Ata. I want to bring down his bow and feel him close to me through his bow. And so Yayael climbed the stool, and he reached for the bow, and suddenly he tipped and the gourd slipped from his hand. They stood stunned when they saw fish come swimming out of the gourd. Silvery, plump fish, one fish, two fish, three, four, and on and on. Enough fish to feed the entire village. Atabe gathered all the villagers while Yaya cooked the fish on an open grill, and that evening, all the villagers went to sleep with barriga llena, corazón contento, full stomach, happy heart. Oh, in gratitude for Yayael's gift. Well, Atabe, in the morning, Atabe went to Itiba's house, mother of the sacred twins. Itiba, I need to borrow your twins so that they can guard over over Yayael's gourd while we go out to the fields. And so before she set off to the fields, she turned to the boys and said, now boys, remember, do not touch the gourd, and do not let anyone touch the gourd. And off she went. But it had been a long day, and the boys became more and more curious of the gourd. One twin said to the other, let's lower the gourd. Let's lower the gourd and we'll hang it back up before everyone comes, and we'll see what's inside. And so one twin stepped over the shoulders of the other, and he reached for the gourd. And just as he was bringing it down, they heard voices coming from the fields. It was Yaya and Atabe. And so in their haste to hang it back up on the rafters, the gourd slipped from the twins' hand and onto the floor. It fell broken in half. They stood amazed, mouths open, eyes wide, when they saw first a trickle, then a spring. A torrent of water came gushing out of the gourd, sweeping everyone away with it, leaving all the people by the edge of their fields. The people got onto their feet and they looked. The water was rising, and up it rose higher and higher. The people scrambled up the mountain to higher ground, and then when they came to the top of the mountain, they stood up there in awe as they looked down and saw the water rise above their fields, rise above the rooftops of their huts, rise above the few remaining trees that Guabansec had spared them. And then they were even more amazed when they saw fish swimming out of the broken gourd, fish unlike any fish that they had ever seen before. They wondered, will the water wash us away? And in desperation, Yaya called, Yael! Yael! Basta! Enough! And halfway up the mountain, the water stopped rising. The water stood still and calm. They looked down, and the next thing they saw was a large expanse of sparkling, shimmering blue-green water that covered their mountain. The 4 mountains had become 4 islands: Cuba, Hispaniola, Jamaica, y Boriquen, Puerto Rico. And that's the story that the Taínos of Puerto Rico told of how the sea began. Thank you for listening, everyone. Thank you.
Wow. Wow, 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 wow.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Great stuff.
Come over here. You know, you're so sad now. So next year, see you then. And our last teller of the night is Bob Canning. Sorry, can't say Kanigas. Thank you.
Kanigas.
From New
Kanigas.
Mexico. Hi, Bob.
Kanigas. Hi. Whoops.
Kanigas. Thank you. So I'm Bob Kanigas from New Mexico. How are you, Bob?
You muted, Bob. You muted yourself.
Thank you, Maria. What a wonderful, wonderful night. What a wonderful, wonderful week. I look like I'm out of focus. Okay, there we go. So, all righty. Just the other day. Am I still muted? Okay. Just the other day, a small little package arrived at our house, and we opened it up. We weren't sure who it was from. And inside was a package of wild rice that was sent to us by our Lakota friend, Navasi Bird in South Dakota. Now, Navasi and her father, Sid Bird, used to live close to us in Santa Fe, and we spent many, many nights around a campfire or around a hearth fire telling stories. And Sid became the oldest member of his tribe, the Philandro band of the Dakota Sioux people. The story I'm going to tell you comes from their part of the world. And although when I think about it, it could come from any part of the world. It's about an old, old woman. Who can say how old she was? Her face was wrinkled like a prune, and she lived back beyond the beyond, up in a cave. Now, this cave could have been in the Black Hills, but it as easily could have been in the Atlas Mountains, or a few miles from here in the Sandia Mountains where we live. This old woman lived in this cave, weaving a blanket. Beside her, not too far away, was her big black dog, Shunka Sapa. At the mouth of the cave, there was a fire, and hanging over the fire was a pot, a soup pot, with hot, steaming, rich washape berry soup. Now, every once in a while, that old woman left her weaving for just a few moments to go and tend to the fire and tend to the washape. She stirred that great, rich, life-giving berry soup When she got up, Shuka Sapa, who had been watching her very, very carefully, went to the weaving, to the blanket that she had been weaving, took it in his mouth and shook it, unraveling the last of the work that the old woman had woven. And so it was that she went to stir the pot, went back to reweave the blanket, and back again to the pot, over and over again. Good thing that she did, because it is said that when that blanket is complete, that will be the day that the stories stop, and that will be the day that the world comes to an end. And so the old woman, that old woman in the cave, there in the Atlas Mountains, there in the Black Hills, here in the Sandia Mountains, they're all weaving the world back together, telling the stories of the world to themselves out loud as they weave. And so we all continue. And so may the stories long continue. Thank you, everybody. What a wonderful, wonderful evening this has been. What a week that we've had to watch from afar. We're looking forward to coming and being with many of you next year there in Marrakesh. Thank you.
So come in, your place is set, you know. No, because we're going to give it, we have a secret, and then you can do it. So it's an Irish tradition that you give the extra drop. I think it's because we were starving people. So we have an extra drop tonight. First of all, I want to say thank you very much, Bob. Do we give him a clap? Yeah. And also we continued our thread of story. We talked about the thread, and it's been such a big theme here. You're so tuned in, Bob, and I'm looking forward to meeting you next year. You know, or sorry.
Indeed.
Exactly. Thank you. So, and now we have to finish as our little extra drop. We have somebody who is here all the way from Canada. And his name is Norman Perrin, and he's been delighting us here in Marrakesh with the use of his whistle in storytelling. So he's going to have the last story, and then I'm going to bring the artistic director back, and then we're going to say goodbye to you lovely people in Cyberland, and we're going to have an almighty party because it's our last night. Darling Bob, Norman, I'm so sorry that Bob is in my
Here we are.
see. I'm so sorry that my typo missed your name out today, but I'm delighted you're here, and thank you for being so gracious.
Thank you. Okay,
Just a word.
stand on this spot.
Don't go in front of the microphone and you'll be grand.
Okay. Okay then. So I did not bring the whistle with me, but I brought a tail. I am so sorry. But I did bring an extra bit of music, courtesy of Colin, because Colin started with a song, and I was so enchanted by it that I asked him, and he said, yes, I will sing it again. And so, Colin, could you come and start mine a little bit?
Of course, oh, Father dear, I often hear you speak of Erin's Isle, our lofty scenes and valleys green, our mountains rude and wild. They say it is a lovely place wherein man might dwell. Oh, why did you abandon it? The reason to me to tell.
This is story dedicated to all those who journey. It starts in the Ottawa Valley, my home, along a great river, the Ottawa River. And it starts in the time when times were hard, what they call there the Dirty Thirties, when there were men and women going east and west and passing each other looking for work. And so it was no surprise for people to see a tall man dressed in blue dusty clothes with a bag on his back go past Frida McNabb's place, past Gord Milky's place, up to Oscar Michael's place, because it seemed like he knew exactly where he was going. And he knocked on the door. Oscar answered the door. It was late at night, but he answered the door. He says, "I'm looking for work," said the O'Donoghue. Well, it just so happened that harvest was in and Oscar had lost a worker and he needed the help. And so the O'Donoghue went to work in the fields. And he was a good worker. And what's more, he was fiddler, for that's what was in his bag on his back. He played at the parties, he played at the weddings and the occasional sad funeral. But when he played that sorrowful music, the soul seemed to be lifted as the people wept at the sweetness of his Irish music. Now, he was a bit of a strange one, though, for you see, on the nights when the sky was clear and the moon was full, the O'Donoghue would take his fiddle and at the stroke of midnight, take the strings off of his fiddle and off his bow. And with the stringless fiddle and the stringless bow, on the stroke of midnight, he would go out into the forest. I really wanted, my uncle was telling me the story. He said he really wanted to find out what it was that the O'Donoghue did on the night when the sky was clear, the moon was full, and he come back with a new tune. But you see, when it was cloudy, he just stayed home like everybody else did. So my uncle, who told me this tale, resolved one February, a cold February like this, back home, to follow him. And he went over to Oscar Michael's place near the stroke of midnight and said, "Here's the grass rake my grandfather borrowed from your father. I thought it was high time we returned it." And Oscar knew that my uncle wanted to exactly what he wanted to do, but he didn't like it. But he welcomed him in, offered him a cup of tea. And my uncle sat there drinking a hot tea, for it was a cold night, watching the O'Donoghue take the strings off his bow and off of his fiddle. And when the fiddle was stringless, he picked it up and he went to the porch and he went left into the forest. And my uncle drank the tea, burning his tongue, and he said, "Good night, Oscar. It's time for me to go home, a long day tomorrow." And when he came to the yard, went to the yard, instead of turning right, he turned left into the forest. And there in the new fallen snow were the footprints of the O'Donoghue. And when he saw the direction of those footprints, he knew exactly where he was going. He was going to the great white pine, the last of its kind. Once these giants had covered the Ottawa Valley, but when the lumbermen came with their saws and their axes, the giants came crashing down. Now there was only a few lonely ones left. And Oscar said that as long as he lived, that tree would stand, even though it was worth a lot of money. That's where the O'Donoghue was going. So my uncle ran through the trees. He came to the clearing. There was the great white pine reaching high into the sky, its roots reaching down into the earth, down into the past. The O'Donoghue came into the clearing and he looked around, make sure that nobody was around. Then he walked over to that tree where the moonlight streamed through the needles, breaking it up into thin streams of light. And he reached up and he plucked off one of those moonbeams and he strung his fiddle and his bow with moonbeams. And when he had done this, he lifted it up to his chin and he began to play. Oh, I wish you could have heard that music. It was so beautiful, so sweet, and so low. And my uncle hiding behind his bush, straining to listen to that music, but it was freezing in midair. It was so cold. And he stepped forward and he stepped on one of the notes lying on the snow. And the sound of that crack, the O'Donoghue stopped. And he looked around and he saw my uncle. My uncle said, "You'll never forget the look on the O'Donoghue's face." It was the look of a man who had wandered the world over, like many Irish have since then, looking for a home, looking for a place that he could rest, looking for a place that he could call home. My uncle ran across. He wanted to say, I'm sorry. Come back, I'm sorry I spied on you." But where the O'Donoghue turned around and walked over to the moonlight and into the shadows, there where the moonlight met the shadows, the snow was smooth. No one ever saw the O'Donoghue again. My Uncle Norman went back and told Oscar anything. And Oscar said, go home, I think you've done enough for tonight." And you would think that would be the end of it. And song was lost, lying frozen upon the ground. But before the sun rose, he went on upon those notes lying upon the snow, one by one by one by one. They began to sound. And Oscar heard them, and Oscar remembered. And he was a fiddler too. And he took those notes and he began to play them at the parties. It was a beautiful song, a sweet song that brought gladness to the heart. But you know, no matter how many times he played that song, or he practiced it, always one note went crack. And thus, that is the lost melody of Black Bay Road. This is the story my uncle told me. And this is the last thing that I will tell you that he told me. He said, "Norman, you will wander many places. Perhaps you even come to the city of Marrakesh. And you remember this, the songs and the stories, remember them, for it is the songs and the stories that will lead your way back home."
The artists asked to say upstanding and give a big clap, and we're going to turn and clap them on now to our artistic director. What did you think of this evening?
Well, as I wander this world over, in every town and every city, I found an Irish bar. And I have not found one yet. Well, at least I thought I hadn't found one yet.
Outside that door?
In Marrakesh, right? But I think they just named it differently.
They named it on Sula Gurama.
Right. That is fantastic. And Maria Gillen.
Yeah. Woo!
Pauline Zoomland. And the other thing that's happened as I've wandered this world over, occasionally driving an Irish band, that after when the official session had finished, they would say, "John, we know a bar where we can go and have a session." And, and I suspect that might happen now. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Don't go away, don't go
Don't
away.
go
with
away.
people.
We have to show you all the people that were here. I might lose connection now. Do a pirouette.
So you don't touch them, okay? Yeah. So just to show you everybody, say hello.
Hello.
Behind you. We see you all here next year.
And we'll have a session tomorrow night on Zoom.
Oh, you know, I know, but we're going home.
Well, is there fine temptation to come over next year?
Now, before you say, you write it and spend all day on there.
Bye.
Midday.
No, it's the end.
Midday.
Lord, while you're going to meet and we see you soon at home. Hiya, Orla. Orla's the face I can see.
Midday.